to all of you guys who are listening in. It's Wednesday. It's Dharmindher, once again, your faithful migration agent from the Canningvale office. We're going to cover something that we did at another level last week, but today I'm going to specifically talk about from the WA perspective, which is the Western Australian state nomination for both the 190 and the 491. And being a live presentation as it is, we are definitely going to be covering every aspect of specifically WA, Western Australian state nomination. Now we're going to talk about issues, if there are any, or perhaps the eligibility requirement, where and how, if it has changed or if it hasn't, or why. I'm sure we're going to get questions like, when are the invitations round and why it didn't happen earlier, and cut off this and that, and how many points. These are all those wonderful things I'm sure I'm going to get questions about. But what I'm going to do in this particular instance is I'm going to talk on one key aspect, which I believe, because we've covered this topic in so many ways, in so many forms, my other colleagues may have also done this, but today I want to talk about when you do get invited, what aspect of accepting it, how to accept it, the when and how, in terms of a simple thing like what and how should the employment contract be, what constitutes that. That is going to be something that I'm definitely going to highlight on and giving you the heads up on that. And also obviously getting questions of some other things and so forth. But primarily, that's what I'm going to be covering. And I'm also going to be telling you on the genuine position in WA and related occupation and non-related occupation, or closely related occupation. What is it? How is it? So that my viewers, whoever you are, and if you have a question, if you are in WA or not in WA, and if you qualify for the Schedule 1, Schedule 2, and all of those things, fun things, as they say, we're going to be covering that. So I don't want to bore you with, give you a whole speech about, WA state nomination, because you should have already known that. But in case you don't, here is a little brief. So first and foremost, if you had 2 years of study completed and you are onshore and you're not Section 48 bar, these are some of the things. And obviously, if you're on the list, being on the graduate occupation list, if you're on Schedule 1 or on Schedule 2, which we will go into shortly, if all those things are applicable to you, and obviously you've already had a skills assessment and you've lodged an expression of interest, the all-important acronym EOI, and in good faith, if your visa is not running out, then in other words, you've got lots of oxygen in your tank to wait for this all-important invite, then that's what I'm going to run with you in terms of what happens after that. Let me just clarify this if I haven't already. An expression of interest, please, it's an expression of interest. It's like you sitting in a classroom telling the teacher, hey, please pick me, I've got the answer. But if you're not picked, because the teacher sees the person in front and says, oh yeah, you answered, and the question is answered, you have to put your hand down because you're not invited, and it's not a visa like some people have ordinarily taught. So it stays in the system for 2 years until various reasons that you're not invited and then it just dies, or if you're invited, you need to reapply again. So just remember that, okay? Seriously, it's quite funny when you are sitting on this side, when you hear from someone when he says, oh, I've already invited, but anyway, don't go into that. Now, as I was saying, what is important is we have to understand that if you tick all those boxes that I just mentioned just now, then you are invited. And you want to know what happens after that. If you are invited on the graduate occupation list, let's just take an example. If you're a mechanical engineer, you studied down here for 2 years, and you've been invited. So you have immediately 28 days to accept the invitation. And what happens over there is you would then need to, because you're on the GOL, graduate occupation list, you need to demonstrate that you either have been working 6 months in Australia, WA particularly if you like, for 6 months in that occupation, failure which, then you go and get a job offer letter, contract, call it what you may, from an employer, which I'm going to go into, who then can be, an employer for 6 months. You have a certain period of time in which to do this, which is 28 days. If you give them all of this, which is what I am going to talk about that, which I'm going to jump straight into that, okay? Then they will, among other things, they will review that it's a proper employment contract, your duties, responsibilities are stipulated, you have also an employer who is an approved sponsor, in other words, approved in the sense that has been at least been operating in the business for 12 months or so. It's related to what you're doing. And you have funny situations if you've been invited as a finance manager. I mean, surely you can't go to someone and say that, oh, I have a kebab shop who is going to give me a job as a finance manager. Good luck with that imagination. People have had various ways of doing that. But those are the kind of things that you have to begin to ask yourself. I finally got the all-important invite, be it a 491 or 190. What is it? How am I going to take this within 28 days and making sure that my employment offer letter stipulates? And if you haven't seen an employment offer letter contract, there are samples out there. We can guide you in that process at the same time. By the way, that's what we do, telling you as how an employment letter is supposed to look like. It's a contract to say, yes, you start, end date, your duties, responsibilities, your salary. Does that actually even match what's out there? You can't just be, at a very low salary for a job that, for example, if you're an ICT PM, you got to start thinking about all of these things. Am I going to be okay if I say I'm $40,000 a year? It's not going to cut it, right? So those are the things that you got to be very, very careful. Then there's also a stipulation that is that position genuine in WA. Now, in some instances, you may have provided this information within the 28 days, and then you realize that, oops, why are they being asked for further information? So the department, or in this case, the state nomination team, are very particular now. If they haven't been before, they are more so now. Why? Because they want to make sure that it's a genuine position, it's WA, and it's related or closely related. So this is where it becomes very challenging. I'll give you an example. So if you are in IT, because IT people have this situation all the time, because you could be working as an IT support officer, which most IT graduates usually end up IT support officer. Your designation is that. But you are a computer systems engineer, you're a software engineer, which is your assessment, which you were actually invited under. So you got to start thinking, my duties, responsibilities from end school, notwithstanding one or two bullet points, have to correspond, if not correlate or match almost to your IT support officer. Because if it is not, then it becomes, that's why they give you 28 days in replying, and they might take another month and a half, by the way, to assess, to qualify, and to check, because there's a big team working on so many applications at the same time. They will tell you, hey, if it is related or if it is not. And in some cases, they might ask you further information. They might ask you, give me further information about the premises. Where do you sit? Pictures and photographs of where and who this company is, if it is not a known company that well. So be prepared for all those kind of stuff, right? Now, the other thing is, I got pieces of information to share with you. Before we go into this, you got to ask yourself, the program year or the calendar year has just started. So we are in, well, August, finished, July, come and gone, September just finished. We're in October. We've only had 3 rounds, really. Now, you guys already know that the quota for WA is not that many, right? So for 190, they have about 1,100. I'm looking at that at the same time. So for 491, they have about 340. So if you look into the website, and I've printed out a couple of data here at the same time, they have up until now, if you just went for the month of October alone, which, by the way, they said invitations issued on 1st of October. Don't be confused over that. It's actually meant for September. So the September round did go off, but it went off on the 1st of October, so don't get confused with that from there. And you can see it was a very small round. It wasn't really big numbers at the same time, but they only invited, for the general stream, they had 60 for 190, and for Schedule 1, Schedule 2, they had 4. In the higher stream sector, they had 117, and for 491, again, they had more on the Schedule 2, which was 196, but general stream only had 40, which not a big round in comparison with what happened really in August and July. However, what you got to remember here is this. Up until now, they have invited close to 2,600 or thereabouts. So a lot of people are being invited. I keep inviting you. You have an EOI in the place, like I said to you. If it's okay, if it is sound, and you, for whatever various reason, haven't been able to get this job offer within the stipulated time or within the 28 days, that EOI just dies a miserable, painful death. And please, you have to reapply because the EOI is dead. And if you reapply, you might be invited again. So this number that I just quoted you, 2006, actually forms that. So it's not a right representation of the actual quota that the WA actually has, meaning that they have a quota, but if they've invited that many people, the take-up percentage is what we are really interested in. Why? Because if you're able to get a job offer and everything else is approved and everything else is correct based on what we're going to be talking about later on about the job offer, contract, letter, what it is, how it is, then you're good. Then you shouldn't really worry too much about percentages and why and how, because how shall I put this? The last, from July and August onwards, the queries that we are getting is, why aren't they releasing more for 190 as opposed to a 491? Because everybody wants to get the 190, and you all know 190 is the cream de la cream. Everybody likes that. If you have an occupation, regardless of whether you're stream 1 general occupation or not, you're going to find that I'm looking at the list down here, if you safely have 85 and above points, which is pretty competitive, by the way, including the 5 points from the state that you're going to get, you stand a very good chance for an invitation regardless of your occupation. So just to put that at the back of your mind. Now, conversely, if you had 80 points or 85 points, including the 15 from the state for the 491, then you stand a very good chance at the same time. The problem, I'm saying it is a problem in the sense that lately, you know and I know, they haven't been inviting a lot on trade occupations. And probably there's a reason behind that. Firstly, competition is insane, number one. Number two, since they've opened that up to virtually everybody in from Schedule 1 and 2, so all those chefs, the motor mechanics, the wall and floor tilers, bakers, perhaps, carpenters, my favorite people, they are the ones who are wondering when our flight's going to come. We've had some people who were invited for 192, by the way, but for the 491 or 190, their points are just within the 65 and 70 and 75. It appears that there are not that many people have been invited. Now, you've seen the website, you've read through one of their very important considerations down here is that for the VET sector, the percentage down here is that you are in the 25 percentile bracket. Now, you're going to compete with both the 190 and 491 for just 25% of whatever the WA quota is. That's a bit of a fist fight going on down there to see who can actually come up and then get an invitation before their existing visa runs out. So all I can say to you is, if you are in a position like that and your visa is running out, or you are in a position to perhaps improve your score, you know, you're going to get higher PTE score, you're going to get NATI, or your partner is going to probably try to get a skills assessment done, or perhaps an English, or if you're about to finish any other things that can get you up from a point perspective, then I really suggest that you do that ASAP. Failure which then you would have to find alternative visa options in order to stand a chance to perhaps be invited in this calendar year. Just remember that this calendar year is only 3 months old. No one knows, and I'm getting a lot of this kind of questions. What if the quota runs out? Fair question. What if the quota runs out? What if they do the same thing like they've done before, where they didn't run any sort of invitations for 5-6 months because they did. No one knows that. No one can predict that. But if you're trending the way and how they have been inviting, fair to say, if you put all those things in place, notwithstanding what's been happening in the last 72 hours, where the whole country is clapping and jumping and saying borders are going to be open in November or December, everybody else going to be vaccinated and whatnot. I don't know about WA because they might open up in Jan, Feb or whatnot, but that's not for us to comment. It is for us to know that this program is a robust, it's a good program, and it's also fairly, fair in the sense that it's really going to be up to you to increase your points to make sure that when you are finally invited, you don't fall under that group of people who, like I just mentioned, 2,600 people were invited, but if you just keep getting invited, but if you don't have a job offer or anything like that, then it kind of defeats the purpose. So how then do you fall into the bracket of having been invited and ensuring that your application actually then passes through the checks and balances? This is what happens. So every time you are invited, you are going to realize that the common question that we get all the time is, why do you need to provide proof that you're going to be paid? Let's say if you're a finance manager, so I'm just taking that, or ICT project manager. Now these are fairly high responsible paying jobs, if you want to call it. So some people have been refused because they've come back and said they don't have much experience and they've only been invited and they're getting a job offer for $45,000 or $50,000. So they have been refused, actually, to be honest with you. And I don't want to be saying why and how and whatnot. So you need to find that if you are in that position, you need to speak to someone. Come to us, come to whoever that you are comfortable with, by the way. Say, hey, how do I get around this situation? How do I ensure that I at least come under the fair work scale that these contracts and these letters and these amounts and these salaries are supposed to be based on? Because really that's what this is all about. And if you have that and everything else is okay, then that's fine. I'll give you a scenario now. There's common questions, again, that's coming up over and over again is, what if you're already working? You're already working, say, 2 months or 3 months into this job. And knowing behold, you get an invitation. Now you think, well, what's the condition here? I have either proof that I've worked 6 months, which in this case you're not, or I provide a letter of offer. Because you already, the scenario here is because you're already working there, you provide the same, because when you started work, you must have had some sort of contract. Now, if you don't have one, then you make sure that your place of work provides that for you. If you have an existing contract, you provide that, genuine, this and that, your start date, and your salaries, your description, and what have you. And you put an addendum to that. You put an addendum like a separate letter that says that you hereby confirm that you are currently still there. You are, as per the original contract that could have been a month or 2 or 3 ago, on top of this. Because it's like as if you're trying to tell them that, hey, listen, I've been invited, thank you very much. I've also got a contract because I've been working for 3 months. And guess what? This is to say that I'm accepting this on the basis of that. It's a very simple thing. But some people don't think about that. They go, oh, what happens then? That's exactly what happens. And you have a little third-party verification letter that says that whatever you're doing is not going to be, farmed out or sent out to another third party to be working, that you will be working for that state company. Those are the little things that just gets you across and everything else checks out. your approval comes through, they determine that it is a genuine thing, and they will call, they will verify, they will do whatever they need to do in terms of ensuring that whoever this party or this company is that you say in WA is a genuine position. Because the last thing you want to do is to go rah rah rah, yeah, okay, it's not even related, you don't even match your ANSCO code for which you have been assessed, and you're putting in an application that they're just going to look at you and go, what are you talking about? You'll be refused, that's fine, you won't be black marked or anything like that. But perhaps they could be like, hey, this joker is trying to apply again for the same thing and giving me the same information. So if you are into that kind of situation, come talk to whoever that you need to, I'm more than happy to clarify that for you. Now, thinking what else I wanted to share something with you here. I like this Facebook Lives because it kind of puts a lot of things. Okay, I was talking about how I'm going to talk about closely related occupations. You all know that the first 4 ANSCO codes of your invitation or your assessment has to somewhat match something like, if you are into the whole nursing field and IT and whatnot to an extent, depending on the roles that you have. If you are confused with that, don't just make your own mind up and say, oh, I think this is closely related. Why? Because I'm a network administrator, but at the time I could be doing a developer programmer's job, and because I've done that in my overseas qualifications, but I finished my master's down here, and all those funny situations that is running in your head, please come clarify with someone, and we'll be able to best help you if that is your situation. Now, I don't know how we're doing on questions, but I'm thinking I'm probably be looking at some serious questions and looking across my colleague Anna, who's probably going to be reading out some of the questions afterwards. But I want to know if I'm sure I'm going to get questions about New South Wales. Guarantee you there'll be a question about New South Wales, but I'll cover that later if I come across. But primarily, I really want to home in on WA for now. Okay, so I will take a few questions and I'll jump back up again in terms of what I want to cover, because I like questions. Maybe I take the first 3 questions, Hannah, if there's any. You want to run that with me?
First question is from Manpreet Sandhu. At what points finance manager will get invitation for 190 and 490?
Okay, so I can say this to you for a fact. About 45 minutes ago, I actually spoke to someone from the state migration team on behalf of a client, finance manager, and that person had 75 points, meaning including their 15 points. And I was told very, very straight to the point that based on the last round that went off, for 491, the points were not high enough. So I was like, okay, letting me know. So to me, I took that as a very direct point that, wow, that means the bar is just raised a little bit more, okay? Which probably explains why the invitation rounds are very little, because they maybe had more people on higher points. For 491 should have been invited. Now, if 491 never got invited on 75 points, I think the answer for 190 is right there, isn't it? So you probably needed to get 80 to 85 to probably stand a chance. Manpreet, right? Was it Manpreet? Yeah. I hope that answers your question. Good question though, because I'm sure you're going to get very different people saying, well, I'm a mechanical engineer, I'm this, I'm on this point, how come I didn't get invited? But let's go. Let's see what we have, Anna.
Jasdeep Kaur. So please tell if we have 491 and until what time can we wait for 190?
Brilliant. I deliberately did not want to mention this in what I was saying in the bits that I said earlier on, because I was hoping somebody was going to ask me this question, and I'm glad you did. Now, we've been told in 1 calendar year, you can only be invited once. Invited meaning that you can be invited, and then if you are approved and you have accepted this, you won't be invited for the next one, meaning the next category. In this case, in your case, if I understand correctly, let's say you've been invited for 491 and you're like, I want to get the 190 because everybody likes the 190. It's a permanent visa, 2 years, you know, you get everything else. So if you've been invited and you have 28 days to accept the invitation and you've given them the documentation, they spend another month and a half, say, and meanwhile you roll over into whatever the next month's invitations are, you can be invited for 190, and it has happened for my clients as well. So in other words, it does work. However, you then have to make a very quick decision, isn't it? Because the state is going to say, oops, hang on, you got one client with 2 invitations. Because you haven't accepted the first one, meaning that, sorry, you've accepted it, but they've approved it and they've given it to you. But if you go and tick and sign the approval, so your EOI is locked in, even though you've been invited for 190, because you've signed and approved and locked in, your 190 will not go forward. Remember that, very, very important. So if you are in that situation, you have been invited for 491, you're just keeping it down there until the last day, the 27th day or whatever the case is, and you send them whatever that you want to get them looking at and approving and all that, because you really don't know what's going to happen in your 190 anyway. And then you are approved for your 190, sorry, you're invited for your 190, that's fine. As long as when they send you the 491 approval, you don't sign and tick and approve that, because then you're locked in into the 491. Okay, that answers your question. And you can only happen that in 1 calendar year. So I thought I'd better clarify that. I hope that's clear. If you're not clear, happy to explain that in Spanish.
Another question is from Yari. Chef at 70 for 190.
Absolutely no, because we don't see that happening. I'm saying absolutely no, like as if I'm not playing the judge and jury down here. I've had a client, lovely fellow from Brazil, I shall not name him. He got invited at 85 points, a very happy fellow. And he was a classic case. Got invited for 491, but he got 491 invitation in May, the last calendar year. Went about it in such a way that he got invited for the next calendar year when he started in this year. Then he got invited for his 190. He's a very lucky fellow. So naturally, 491 not going ahead, 191 has been lodged, by the way. So yeah, 70 points for 190 is not going to happen. And here's the reason why. Here's the reason why it might not happen. So perhaps a good time to talk about the ranking system whenever they invite you. So here you are, you've done your certificate 3. I'm talking about the trade courses here. You've done your cert 3, 4, and your diploma. And you're like, I've done everything. I've done 8 each. I've done my NATI. I've got all the other points, and I'm sitting on 85 points. How come I'm not being invited? Because if you remember, when they rank you on the invitation, what they're looking at? Highest qualifications. Now, if someone who's done, let's just say, for example, and it's the truth, it has happened before. People have done an MBA, people have done some other higher degree course, and there is no pathway, they're not being invited, or let's say there's no pathway because there's no occupation related. They have gone and done a trade course, which they're allowed to when their 485 came into, or they were doing it concurrently. So when they apply for the same thing as you as a chef, guess what they're doing? Highest qualification is master's, or highest qualification is bachelor's, or whatever. Or better still, the highest qualification is an advanced diploma. So all those things are a little pecking order that determines what your chances are, not just on the points that you've accumulated, but also on when you actually launch your EOI. So all of these variables determine your chances on whether you're 190 or you're 491. So that's perhaps one of the strong considerations. If you think you've got some time, you wanted to do an advanced diploma, perhaps to increase your chances, which you can do a fast track course and faster and all the rest of it, then you can choose to do that and see what your chances are in that regard.
Nearly similar question, but it's for software engineer, 80 plus 5 points for a
So 80 plus 5, that means she's talking about the 190 software. I I should think your chances are good because I'm going to look at, hang on, okay, I'm software, I got a software engineer in July were invited at 95 points. And the EOI effect date was in August. Superior English and everything else obviously meant that this person had 95. But if you're on 80 plus the 5, and if I look at the August, yeah, there's another 90, 95. Systems administrator was invited for on the basis of 80 points. So that was in August. So September, that's in the last round. If you didn't get invite on 80 plus 5, I suggest just hang in there. Just probably this round was not a very friendly one, as to say. And if you got some time, just wait to sort of see, you know, how that is different from those people who had 90, 95 points in August and in July, and how they were invited. It's a fairly new program, so just hang in there.
She has quite a long question.
It's okay.
I'm a chef at 70 points of my own. Food is completely done, but trying to get affected by Section 20K. Is there any other visa which I can apply while employed? I have 13 months of full-time experience and 5 months of part-time experience. Is there any chance to apply visa while on Section 20K?
Okay. So that was the other thing. Again, I specifically didn't want to highlight in what I was saying because I was hoping that will come up in a question. I wanted to know who else was being affected by it. So now if you're Section 48 bar, really for those people who are not affected by it, let's spare a thought for people who are. What it means that you are firstly not eligible for the Western Australian nomination program. And if you are inadvertently, accidentally invited, and if they realize you're Section 48, your application is not going to go forward. So it's actually put in a very clear email when they invite you. So which really means that it's tough, isn't it? Because it's a funny situation. We don't know, firstly, when they're going to lift this Section 48 bar, because it's only this state that is actually doing that. Number one, or in this particular instance, I don't know about the other states. However, in order to be eligible for the program, you need to be onshore. Now, if you're saying, oh, borders are going to be opening, I'm going to chance upon going offshore, which is really what you have to do. Section 48 really means that you cannot do any application onshore, right? So if you go offshore and you want to apply, you can't because you won't be invited. Now, it's one of my most hated words in migration. Whenever you say you're Section 48 bar, it's almost like, oh my God, you got the plague or something like that. Not many visas that you can actually apply. In terms of PR, permanent visas options, you could try to see if you are eligible for other states that doesn't prevent you from being invited, that is, because you want to be invited, you want to be processed, and once approved, then whatever the states is, not in WA and the other states, then you can say, right, thank you for approval and doing whatever you need to, meeting their requirements from that particular state. Then you go offshore, then you lodge the visa, then you wait, sit, prepare to come in because borders are opening and all that, on the basis that they grant you that particular visa that you apply. So at the moment, you could seemingly try to do an EOI, let's say in New South Wales, where supposedly, I'm just giving you an example. If you're eligible and because you don't have to be living there, you don't need a job offer, and if you are in stream 3 and if you are invited, good luck, because there's very high, crazy demand for that. And considering your occupation and points, you're not going to be very likely to be invited in that stream either. So I don't know what you can do, but hopefully wait for some change to happen, and they might just say, oh, for these Section 48 people, let's bring them in. They just might do that, you never know. Pray hard, Christmas is around the corner. Might be your wish granted. Any other questions? I'm sure there's questions.
Amit, what about student entry in WA? Specific date, when can we go?
Oh, okay. Well, there's no specific date in which you can firstly come in. the universities are very, very encouraging in terms of providing a lot of these offers and approvals and whatnot in terms of, you know, allowing you to apply for this corresponding visas that you seemingly are given the COEs and whatnot. But the announcement really was about borders opening, which I just did something yesterday on another platform, was just to say that they're going to roll this thing out in phases. So really, the permanent residents and the citizens existingly who has been in the last how many few, you know, 14, 15 months who have not been able to come back, I think the preference has really been given to them first to say, all right, you guys can come in first, right? And then, you know, all the visitors and the tourists and whatnot, I don't think so they are going to be just jumping up and down and says, all right, you form part of the equation at the same time. So I think they will scatter that in. So I can't answer your question as to precisely when they can be allowed to come in, because I don't have the information at the same time, by the way. But you are eligible to apply if you're offshore, if you are applying for a student visa, if that's your question. You can be given the visa, then there's always whatever, and when specifically they say, right, now, welcome to Australia, as in all the floodgates are open, fly in, pretty much. Excuse me.
Adam is asking, hello, I'm holding 85 for 190 as a chef. I'm bachelor graduated from Victoria, but at the moment I'm in WA. So it would be great if you can tell me what's my best option for now.
Yeah.
190 with 85 points per chef.
Yeah, and he's only allowed to, not only, he's allowed under Schedule 2, he's a chef, he's not a WA graduate, pretty decent points, by the way. You've got some time by the looks of it. You just got to wait, because like I said to you several times, they haven't really invited that many trade occupations as such. And in the event that they did, the example that I gave you earlier on was on 85 points. That means the person at 85 plus the 5, so that became 90. I'm using that as my benchmark, but that person was a WA graduate. So you are unfortunately not. So you are going to compete with that many people outside for all those trade occupations, the painters, the wall and floor tilers, the carpenters, the motor mechanics, you name it, you know, all those trade occupations, which there's only going to be a 25 percentile group. So the competition, my friend, is insane, right? So hang in there. I don't have a crystal ball, but if I did, I would like to chance on the fact that WA might just get a rush of quota of some kind. Hopefully, McGovern, if you're listening, hey, this is for you. Please, on behalf of all the trade occupations and people from WA, just get our quota, you know, probably increase to, I don't know, 3,000, 4,000. We need people. Everybody's been crying out and screaming for that. That's not for me to make a political statement, but that will be most welcome. So that people like yourself and everybody else can actually compete not in the graduate occupation list alone, but in the Schedule 1 and 2, so that everyone lives happily ever after.
Next question is from Mubashir. Please answer my question, thanks. Is WA considering occupation caps or ceiling as well at each invitation round?
No, we don't know about that. Nothing has been mentioned about that. That's supposedly expert opinion everybody else is giving. I don't know of any caps or anything like that. We just know, and we have our own lists which we compile internally. Everybody else does that, and we do our own little statistics of, hey, you know, in August someone in this particular occupation were invited, and these were their little credentials, meaning they had this number of points and so on and so forth. So internally, we do that not knowing that there's any caps at play. I don't think so.
Akita Patel is asking, system analyst 85 points including state. Probably asking if any chance.
Absolutely. I'm looking at, we had we had systems analyst, was it?
Yeah.
Hang on, systems analyst?
System analyst.
Systems analyst is not on the list. Yeah. Was it a trick question? Yeah. The systems analyst is not on the list. Systems analyst and business analyst are not on the WA list. I don't know why you applied in WA because you're not on the list.
Another question is from Benevolent.
You're not on the, sorry, you're not on the graduate occupation list. Yeah.
She's not in general with the system analyst.
She's, yeah, you can check that. Systems analyst, business analyst, they are on the, I got an ICT, no, they're not. They're clearly not, no. Yep, they're not.
Next question is from Benevolent. Can I have cook employment contract after invitation while applying for chef?
Well, clearly not, isn't it? Because that's why you're either a chef or you're a cook. If you've been invited as a chef, you should be providing a chef contract. Now, if you've been invited as a cook, correspondingly, you do that. It's an apple and orange scenario. You know, they're both fruits, taste different texture-wise, but no. Yeah.
Looks like there are a lot of chefs in our viewers.
Oh, I can plead to them. My heart goes out to you guys. I've got a lot of chef clients at the same time. They're all like, what will it take to get an invitation? Because, and in fairness, some of them were invited for 491, but they thought, no problems. I shall try my luck on the 190. And they're feeling the effects of that because they're like, oh, hang on, we're not being looked at 190 anymore. And they should have accepted the 491. I'm just saying. So, yeah.
Gautam is asking same question. Chef 80 points for WA.
Chef 80 points for WA. All I can say to you, same thing back. Chef 80 points for WA. It's like a trade-off. It's not happening. It's just we're seeing that at the same time. A very, very conservative regard given to WA for that matter for chefs. On one hand, they're saying, I'm sure you read and I'm sure you're knocking your head on the wall, hopefully not in a very violent way, that what will it take? The state is screaming out for chefs. They say they need chefs. They've advertised. Everybody else is jumping up and down that yes, and yet they're not inviting them. And people like yourself are saying, pick me. I've got everything. We're 80 points. I'm not even 65 or 70 points. It should be invited. I'm not going to tell you what next to do, but go to the state nomination team and says, oi, please invite me. It's not going to happen. Not yet.
Next question is from Veera. How long does it take to get nomination approval after accepting the 190 nomination on the ICT program?
I know who it is. This is my client. It's okay. Yeah. Well, you're tuned. Yep. That's only one Veera in the world. So if you're listening, you know I've handled your application. We've submitted everything else. If you want me to say this live on behalf of everybody else as proof that yes, all your documents are with them. We don't know why they're taking their own sweet time, and their own sweet time has only been about a month, by the way. So let it be about a month and a half or so, and you'll get an approval, Veera. Trust me. And don't message me tonight after this conversation. I know who he is anyway.
Justin, what points can we get invited for?
Wow. Firstly, accountant is going to be on, schedule 2, isn't it? So you are going to be very hard pressed. I've got a client, 95 points, all 9s on PTE and RT and this and that. WA grad at the same time. Not getting an invite for some reason. So don't know why. So that's why people begin to think, oh, is there a cap? Is that something else happening behind as to why they are not? Because if you got high points, you should be. But don't forget, You are in the same equation now with everyone in Australia under Schedule 2. And accountants, last I checked, there were thousands of them around, and they're all trying to compete in whichever possible stream, and they all want to get the 190 at the same time. That's the reason why.
What points can one be invited for social work?
See, I think this is an unwritten law somewhere. All this social work, nurses, which we haven't come across yet, and to an large extent, chefs, they're all really in so much in demand. There's always going to be in demand. And you think that if you had about 80 to 85 points, I think you should be even getting a 491, let alone a 190. So very difficult question to answer as to why you're not invited. Is there a chance? These are all the things that we ask all the time. What do you think? You really don't want to know what I think, because I think you should all be invited at 65 points as far as I'm concerned. But unfortunately, I'm not the organ grinder in this equation. You 80, 85, again, fighting chance, they say. You got a fighting chance for invitation. And then you're like, okay, one round goes, another round goes. And then you notice your window, your whatever visa that you have is running shorter and shorter. And now I don't even want to go into how you can extend your student visa down here besides student visa. And people who had applied for COVID, good luck, because now if the borders are opening, you can't go on COVID as well. So there's all kind of funny situations happening. So just watch the space in the next 2 to 3 months, and just hopefully quotas increase, the speed in which they're going to be processing applications happens at the same time. And then there's backlog. There's backlog for people who applied as accountants, taxation accountants, general accountants, and then all sort of occupations in November 2019. I had a client just yesterday got approved, taxation accountant, after 2 years. I don't know what's happening, but somehow something is making sure that they either approve all the backlog at the same time, and then perhaps see, oh, we already have that many accountants, so let's invite more. Maybe some instrument is at play behind some decision making. No one knows.
Mandeep Rai, how long WA nomination approval take after pre-invite? I'm waiting from more than 4 weeks.
More than 4 weeks, very average. Very, very average, okay? So more than 4 weeks is good. If they've asked you a little bit more information, like the usual ones that they normally do, provide proof that you were here, and utilities, and residency, and all the other stuff that they've asked you, aside from from your employment contract and what have, then that's all good. Then 4 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks is really the turnaround time, and you are more than welcome to call them, ask them, good luck. They might tell you, oh yeah, this and that, the other, but 4 weeks is very average, okay? Now, by the way, if your visa is expiring and you're like, oops, I really need to get an approval, you can contact them, give them a screenshot of your expiry date and tell them, oh Baba, hurry up. And they usually can expedite that.
Ramik, what are my chances for 491 for occupation support and F engineer and EC? Got 85 points, but offshore applicant.
Offshore applicant. So what is his chances for an invite? Absolutely no. You only be invited if you're onshore. So that's an easy fix. So if you are what you say you are in terms of your occupation, and you're on whatever the list that you have seen and matched as well, if you're not onshore, you won't be invited. Simple as that. That's okay, that's cool. Yep. I totally appreciate you running through the questions at the same time, because we do this thing live. You see me, you don't see behind the scenes, the lady behind furiously trying to type and see and scratch her head and choose which questions to give through. Yeah.
I found one. Faru,
okay. Yeah.
Is there a possibility for 491 or 190 on electrical engineer without any job?
Yeah, I mean, see, a lot of people have this misconception. Chicken and egg scenario, isn't it? Do you need an employment letter offer contract to apply an expression of interest? Technically speaking, no. Now, if you've applied, because you don't know when you're going to be invited, and knowing behold, you are invited in the next round, then you have 28 days. To get that all important, I was going to say something else, employment letter, offer, contract, what have you. Then that 28 days is 28 days. If you're unable to get that, then that EOI dies. Pretty much, that's just what it is. So, and if you are not, and if you don't have that, which is your question, if you don't have that, are you, because you're not claiming points in your EOI that I have already worked 1 year. If you have, then that's fine. Then you claim that, then you mention that, so that when you are invited, you are saying that, oh, I'm accepting this on the basis that I've already worked for 6 months, which is just 20 hours a week for 6 months. You're in.
Samoda Ishani, is there any chances for 491 visa under family sponsorship, offshore applicants in WA?
Yeah, 491 family sponsorship has got nothing to do with WA. It has got to do with the 189 quota. Now, every time they invite anyone on the 189, which is on quarterly basis, if you have a family in WA, which you are eligible for, then you are invited on that basis, like how the 189 is. So whoever they've invited on 189, say they've invited 500 people globally for various occupations and so forth. And then they also look into the quota. Those visas have quotas. And they will say, oh, how many people have applied for 491 family? They will see whatever the occupation is and when the EOI was lodged and on how many points. So at the moment, a 189 is being approved, say, 80, 85, 90 points, maybe, not even 80, sorry, depending on what occupations we've just noted as well. Then if you're being invited at 90 points, 491 family, if you have 75 or 80 points of your own, then you get the 15. You stand a good chance depending on your occupation. So you should just sit back. I had a client from Mauritius got approved not long ago, or got invited, sorry, not long ago, on not very high points.
$85 points for civil engineer, is that enough?
Civil engineer, if
there's a couple of people who are asking that.
Okay, civil engineers, and they're in WA, I presume, or
some are in New South Wales.
Okay, so the New South Wales. So here's the thing. So by me saying this, and I also can also understand what for our viewers' point. So under the graduate occupation list, because there is no real delineation to say they have invited that number of people for GOL, and then when you've seen in the October 1st breakdown, which I had that earlier, and you can also see on their website, that how many have actually been invited under the general stream and the vocational stream and so forth. You see, you're competing with people from all over Australia when you're talking about Schedule 1 and Schedule 2. As opposed to if you're a civil engineer with 85 points in WA. I've got civil engineering draftsperson who were invited for 190 on 85 points. This is civil engineering draftsperson. So if you're a civil engineer, I'm not saying that's just because you're an engineer or whatever, 85 points, depending on when you've lodged your EOI. And also, you know what? I'm going to put it literally live. I'm going to tell you, perhaps there's something wrong with your EOI. You might be surprised. There are sometimes, because you've done this EOI yourself. Again, I'm not saying this so that I want you to come to me or anything like that, but let me put it in this context. I've had clients who've, done whatever 485 themselves. They've done the EOI because it's easy and all that kind of stuff. And 6 months, 8 months goes by, and they're like, well, yeah, I didn't get an invite. I'm like, oh, okay. And then they suddenly call us, they contact us. And I'm like, okay. I said, why don't you sit down, come see me, meet me in my office or whatever the case is. And then they send me the EOI. I'm like, okay, well, firstly, I don't just go into someone's EOI because you've done an EOI. I mean, because you obviously have to take our services and then I see and advise you. But one or two, I've just done it out of humor. I'm thinking, fun and giggles, let's do this. 99% of the time, there is a mistake in the EOI. And I'm not going to tell you that live why. And you'd be surprised. And those 2 or 3 who have actually done this themselves, if they're actually listening in, they're probably laughing now, or thankfully because they were crying initially. They make basic fundamental mistakes in which they were never going to be invited in the first place. All right. So this kind of things can make a difference into actually saying that, hey, maybe if you need to really come and see or talk, no problems, get in touch. And you'd be surprised. Somebody just looks at us and says, I think you made a mistake in the EOI. That's why you're not even getting an invite in the first place on 80, 85 points. So hopefully that's not the case for some of you, but I'm speaking from experience. It has happened before. So be mindful. Yeah. Now, if for those of you who had and did post questions on New South Wales and whatnot, I'm just going to say just very roughly, if you haven't answered your questions, just want to let you know that for New South Wales, apparently, just to remind yourself, if you're from here and if you applied under Stream 3, which really is the case, remember, if your EOI is still there, if you were not invited in the last window, last bracket, you have to reapply the ROI again and keep putting them in and just hope and pray and you are invited. We are seeing from other cases where 90, 95 points seem to be getting a very strong chance for an invitation as and when they happen. So I can only say that for New South Wales as of now. And lastly, it was very promising to see that South Australia has announced an international offshore list of their own at the same time, because I think these are all good signs. If they have put an offshore list, that means they also feel and believe that borders are going to be opening, things are going to open up, the policies are going to be tweaking here and there, and all might be getting very excited in the next 3 to 6 months to say the least. But as far as WA is concerned, which is really our topic of discussion today, and to all those viewers, to all those fellows who've asked this question, and if for whatever various reason it hasn't been answered live, feel free to contact me. So Dharmindher Singh is my name. I'm one of the agents here in the Canningvale branch in Perth. You would have my contact details, I'm sure. Feel free to, offline, as you say, email us. I'm happy to take those questions, and I just hope that this has been of some benefit to you. At the same time, I'm going to roll out 3 other sessions concurrently, and I'll tell you what they are, and if that's something of interest, you can tune in again. And for all of that, here's me signing off from Canningvale. A very good afternoon. Finally, it's sunshine. Thank you. I can't wait to go mountain biking this weekend again. See ya.